Okay. Just what you wanted to hear about was a privacy thing, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, this is actually just a clone of a workshop, a 2.5, 3 hour workshop I gave back at Computers, Freedom, and Privacy in 2009 at GW University, the one that the ACLU and a whole bunch of other people put on. Just basically sort of updated a couple things. The workshop itself has some exercises which kind of help understand the details. But anyway, so you can see the title there. It's essentially extending what we know as methodologies for personal use to protect sensitive personal information. Actually, long ago, if you look on our website, you'll see it's known as the privacy assessment methodology. But not really peddling it. No one really cares about privacy. They just want to complain about it. They don't want to do much or whatever. So anyway, so why are we here? I'll be kind of slamming through these pretty fast because there's a bunch of slides, and like I said, it's a much longer presentation. I will assume that everybody here knows various methodologies, and if the majority of you have issues with some of the terms I'm using, just shout and we'll make sure we understand them. Now, this is not anything to do about yet another checklist of information to watch out for or to do. It's more about a repeatable process for assessing your privacy posture, much like your security posture. Also to maintain anonymity wherever it's appropriate, and to manage our exposure. It's definitely not for beginners in privacy. Not really teaching any particular information security methodology. And it's not another checklist. And of course, it's not legal, tax, or financial advice. You have to see the appropriate licensed professionals for that. So what the tutorial consists of is the description of the methodology. I guess at this point I'd say I'm initially first an engineer, then a privacy guy, and then switched over or got more into security because no one's really paying for privacy, or it's really boring. Then had the opportunity to take the NSA IAM and IEM courses with Security Horizon, and basically got some ideas of how to extend that approach to the privacy space, managing personal information of your own. This methodology could be replicated and utilized by various trusted advisors, financial advisors, accountants, and the like. At one point, I was promoting to use in conjunction with this something like your CV, CVSS databases for privacy vulnerabilities, creating a privacy vulnerability database. Presented on that the InfraGard Day once. But once again, people don't care about privacy, so that didn't stick. So we're going to talk about application of methodologies, and some of this will look familiar to some of the things involved in actual information security methodologies. We map personal data, classification, information flows, layered defenses, look at handoffs and anonymity, pseudonymity, specifically delve into things like asset protection issues, private information in the hands of third parties, assessing the private information handling practices of other people, like those third parties, and we already talked about those other two. Who am I? I've done a bunch of stuff, a bunch of different roles. We won't go there. This is I've been everywhere man slide. You've seen that before if you've been here before. I have a few certifications. Yeah, well, okay. So if the NSA IAM methodology is probably, a lot of it is what you actually see today in common practice within the federal government, like mentioned in the previous presentation, like the FIPS 199 security categorization, the high, medium, low, and the impact value and all that sort of stuff. That stuff's out there. That just got me kind of educated in the right direction to start thinking about how to apply it. There's some differences between InfoSec methodologies and how we apply this to the privacy space. Number one, we don't stop at the local network boundaries. We extend it out into the world and where all of your information is going. The baseline activities are different. They're customized for privacy, it's tailored for privacy. Not necessarily interested in policy and technical ratings because we're not looking at software. Anonymity, pseudonymity, these various concepts are applied differently. IAM doesn't include pen testing. We're going to talk about doing some pen testing of third parties for your private information handling. We'll also come up with a posture rating in this methodology. And I talked about the database, which would be nice to have, but we'll aggregate everything just like you do in the posture rating. And you can do 100% pen testing of third parties if you want, as opposed to partial. So basically, we're going to have an overview of a repeatable methodology, and there's that plug again for the privacy vulnerability database. So one of the first things you want to ask is, well, what are you protecting against? You know, what are the threats that you're after, or what are you trying to protect? Are you like a public figure? Do you have assets that you're trying to protect? Really piss somebody off and they want to get you, you know, whatever. So you know, back to the typical threat actors, motivations, and resources. So now we get into identifying critical information assets. Yes, you have to itemize all this stuff. So if you were sitting down like in a workshop doing this, you basically dig all this crap out and start listing it. You know, some people, you know, location of your residence is not as important or whatever, but you need to list all the stuff before you can start evaluating its value. So then also take a look at how sensitive the information is. You'll notice the colors kind of correspond to some classification levels. So for instance, something yellow, super personal, you know, maybe that belongs in the floor safe, you know, just thinking. Then you have to identify where all this information actually exists. Is it on the home computer, in a file cabinet, email, websites, going through the snail mail? Is it in a call center somewhere? You know, some government has it. You know, they have plenty of it on us, right? Marketing organizations, mailing list rentals, you know, all the places where you have to give out your information, either voluntarily or not. And then once you have all that, look at separating the data by classification, then by risk, and looking at, you know, the concepts of anonymity, pseudonymity, laying it out by its location, and identifying all the boundary points, contact points where information goes from one location to another or may cross from one classification to another, because oftentimes something you feel is really classified at one level and you think it's in one space, you have some other demand for that information, all of a sudden it's going where you really don't want it to go, so you have to figure out just what the heck you're going to do about that if it's a risk you really want to continue taking. Then you get to update information, looks like. Okay. Identify your constraints that you have to work with as well. Yeah. And then we have the typical assign your impact value. This is at the information asset level. So, you know, like my Swiss bank account number is probably pretty high value. Yeah. And then we do this on the using like the security categorization, the FIPS 199 approach with the high, medium, low. We look at the whole CIA and non-repudiation if that's appropriate. Okay. And then for each location where you have different information assets, you assign the high water mark or define or derive the high water mark for that location of the information. The baseline information classes and categories we've tailored specifically for privacy. So on the management side, it'd be privacy policies, roles and responsibilities, contingency and emergency plans. On the technical side, it would be your identification, authentication, account management, auditing, malicious actors, event protection system. A lot of this is very similar to the typical areas. Some of them are very specific. Okay. So if you're doing a family personal assessment, you need to write down what it is that you're, this is more, sorry. Yeah, so basically this is saying that you should really have a family privacy policy. In other words, of the information and the different categories, is there certain information that you just will not disclose to certain people or at all? You know, what is the threshold you have to cross in order for that information to go to someone? That needs to be clearly defined so that there's agreement and so that you can actually get a handle on the information. And then you actually apply that policy and you go through the information you derived so far and identify anything that requires fixing or requires further research. Then we get into third parties. This is the fun part. But first we're going to gather information on the third parties. We're not quite ready to go knocking on their doors in an invasive manner, but we have to gather specifics on what is their privacy policy. Gosh, you know, I did this back in 2009 originally, and a lot of things have changed in just 3 years, it seems. Then you have to ask, you know, how do you prevent other people from making changes to your account? Is it possible for you to update or correct the information that the third party has? And can you limit the sharing of the information? And you contact these third parties and ask them these things. You'd be surprised the answers you get, right? More and more people are doing that, of course. Other questions: how long do you keep the information? What type of background check is required for employees that access it? How about outsourced contractors? All that kind of fun stuff. Is any of your information sent to or accessed from another country? If so, what are the laws pertaining to that? That is a big gaping gap in privacy today. Basically, there are no common laws, and laws in other countries can be non-existent. And then the fun part, the whole OSINT part, what's out there on the internet about you. Google, local courthouse, take a look there. Credit headers, credit file, motor vehicle records. Net Detective is one particular source I like. Somebody else turned me on to Maltego, which I haven't quite figured out how to use right. And of course there's other OSINT sources. So the basic process is gather all the information, analyze it, identify questions and concerns you have, apply questions and tests to the things, mechanisms, organizations, protecting your information, and gather the vulnerability data. So really detail those vulnerabilities. You identify the weaknesses, potential issues. You do it for your internal processes, the way your family works, the way the things around your family works, and then those true third parties out there. You might want to stop here, just like you would do after a vulnerability assessment, and fix stuff and then continue, or just continue on and do the whole statistical, mathematical piece to get your posture rating so that you have a baseline to come back to next time. So testing policies of third parties. Now, doing this yourself, of course, could be legal. Getting other people to do it for you, I'm not quite sure about that yet. Posing as yourself, act as though you forgot key information required to access your account and see what information they'll give you about your account and if they'll let you make any changes. Hire somebody else to do that. I don't know if a power of attorney is enough for them to be able to do that. That would be an interesting test. And it seems like a whole new profession, social engineering to test privacy of accounts. Yeah, people probably love this one. Vary your name and address information slightly across different organizations so that when you receive mail, you know where it might have gotten leaked from, or if you get it's junk mail or whatever, or some other information. To assess third parties, this is really almost like a vendor compliance type approach, right? And you want to know how they do business, right? You might even want to go visit them. If they're a small business, you might want to go look in their dumpster. Do you see customer records in there? That happens. Yeah, and then address any other questions and concerns you may have with them. So when you're evaluating all this information, you want to pay special attention to information or activities that cross data classification boundaries. So, like I said, you might be required to bundle information to go to some destination, but what you thought you were going to be able to maintain control of, all of a sudden you've lowered its classification or made it more exposed, right? Pay special attention to places where you have information that you're making it anonymous or I'll never get that one right. Pseudonymous. And make sure that everything's set up correctly. You may have other people involved in handoffs of information. Can you trust them? If they get bribed, what's the impact of that? Another key point is making sure you have what they refer to as dangerous assets appropriately isolated. So like in like cars, houses, boats, those sort of things that can cause injury to people or result in lawsuits. It's pretty good to have those in LLCs to provide personal protection. Also, if something happens with them, it might be harder to find you. So for each system tested or evaluated, you want to document vulnerabilities found. And then after you get all those, from all those systems or locations, you assign the severity rating. Sound familiar? But you have to create your own severity ratings because they don't really exist. It's not like the InfoSec world. So, and if there was a privacy vulnerability database that assigned severity to different types of vulnerabilities, then you have some resource to draw upon. But so then you do the typical assessment approach and sort all that and add it up, or add it up and sort it out, which is pretty much all that. Hang on to the number once you have the severity ratings or posture ratings calculated. Save it for next time. And of course, since you're using your own severity ratings, you can't really compare from one person to another. So it's like in the InfoSec world, if your overall rating is 7 and somebody else's is 8, then you have a rough idea, right? Because they all use the same general database of severity information. But this is all rather subjective to the user, the person or family that's putting this together. So then once you have the results, you do the typical, what do you remediate? Focus on highs first. What are your countermeasures? How do you manage your risk? And follow through on it. Okay, so opportunities for improvement. There I am with that privacy vulnerability database again. Actually, part of the idea with that was if we're able to create that, companies, government agencies could also subscribe to it to identify issues and public concerns. Policymakers could utilize it to identify opportunities for change. And that is all. I'll put in the shameless plug for the Twitter list that I curate, which has exploits on it. It's pretty useful information. And yeah, this is much more meaningful if I could actually have some graphics. Because the whole concept of mapping out the data and where it is, as like your typical network diagram. Then when you start mapping it, going out beyond that, you really need to like label stuff or have multiple overlays for each classification of data. And the drawing of the handoffs of information for dealing with anonymous type handoffs. Those are better explained with graphics, but yeah, if there was ever any interest in actually putting on a workshop, I'd be glad to go through it in more detail and putting together graphics and actually work through some of the exercises that we have. We had a really good exercise when I first put on the workshop. Had people from National Network to End Domestic Violence as part of the workshop. Someone from NSA actually was there too. Small world. It was very productive in terms of identifying gaps, and it's just amazing that even when people try to cover their tracks or keep certain information concealed, there's so many different ways to get at that information. It's something you have to manage. It's pure and simple, and you have to know how people find stuff. Like, anyway, so nobody cares about privacy, right?
So the process of doing this, did you notice any companies or agencies that are pretty bad about leaking personal information?
Well, I haven't actually done any like the pen testing thing. I do know that what you'll find through the process of asking the questions is that you'll make decisions that, why am I doing business with this company? Because especially earlier on during the privacy age, let's call it, you'd ask these questions, they'd go like, huh? And still, you get that same reaction in some of them.
You mentioned the Coalition for
The National Network to End Domestic Violence.
So, did they have anything anecdotal or adventure?
The exercise the exercise that we went through was rather specific, and about the only thing that really wasn't cut over in terms of names was professional licenses, and yeah, that's pretty much it. But the comment was that there has to be a total cutover, a total switch in identity. And on that note, all I did was clone this from 3 years ago, and I'd love to have a reason to update it. But I have 2 book titles that I didn't get put in there that I found most useful. One is How to Be Invisible. Excellent book by J.J. Luna. And go figure, The Private Investigator's Handbook by Chuck Chambers. It's one of the tricks that I loved the most was to get a mailing address, drive around on the country roads and find the row of mailboxes, right? Nobody's around, get out your post hole diggers, put your mailbox in there, have somebody come by every couple of weeks, pick up mail. That's pretty hidden. You have to trust the person that picks up the mail. Maybe it's not staked out for 2 weeks, but and I guess I have to put in the other disclaimer. So a lot of the stuff that you can do, really tightly focusing in on privacy and securing the private information. Yes, it does pertain to people and families and business-related information, but if you're working in a high-profile capacity, obviously you want to pay special attention to it. A lot of the techniques you'll find as you get into it with the anonymity piece and covering your tracks is if you're involved in various field operations, the same sort of techniques apply. So whether it's in this country or another. Question?